الحمد لله رب العالمين وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد. In our previous class we had discussed a number of issues the author he had mentioned or referred to rahimahullah ta'ala, and we continue reading, and he mentions وَيَنْبَغِي أَنْ يَبْدَأَ مِنْ دُرُوسِهِ وَفِي الْحِفْظِ وَالتَّكْرَارِ وَالْمُطَالَعَةِ بِالْأَهَمِّ فَالْأَهَمِّ. And it is incumbent for the student that he begins with his lessons, that he begins from his lessons with memorizing and with repeating and reviewing and researching with that which is most important, and then after that, that which is most important, and the obligation of showing preference to that which takes precedence in Al-Islam, in obligation. There is knowledge that is incumbent for all of us to learn, and this knowledge, it takes precedence. Knowledge of the proper creed and belief, first and foremost, and likewise knowledge of the obligations and how to perform them and how to establish them, as well as knowledge of their prohibitions and how to avoid them and stay away from them. Knowledge of Al-Islam and the sacred rights of Al-Islam and the great obligations and requirements of Al-Islam in order to establish the deen in one's life precisely and properly. This knowledge, it takes precedence. And likewise knowledge with regards to everything that would invalidate Islam and that which is contrary to Al-Islam, or that which would bring deficiency to Al-Islam from the major sins and the major crimes and actions of disobedience, in order to learn that and to avoid that and stay away from that and leave it upon insight and clarity. So this knowledge here, it takes precedence. That which one he must know in order to be upright and obedient to Allah Azza wa Jal and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam in one day and one night, and as he's living his life. And then likewise with regards to that which is most important after that as well, in order and with tadarruj, little by little and step by step, showing preference to that which takes priority. He mentions now, he says, وَأَوْلُ مَا يَبْتَدِئُ بِهِ حِفْظَ الْقُرْآنِ الْعَزِيزِ حِفْظَ الْقُرْآنِ الْعَزِيزِ فَهُوَ أَهَمُّ الْعُلُومِ وكان السلف لا يعلمون الحديث والفقه إلا لمن حفظ القرآن وإذا حفظه فليحذر من الاشتغال عنه بالحديث والفقه وغيرهما اشتغالا يؤدي إلى نسيان شيء منه أو تعريضه للنسيان. So he says here, and the first thing that he should begin memorizing is the Quran, is the mighty Quran. The first thing he will begin with regards to his memorization will be the Quran, the Book of Allah, because this is the most important of all sciences. He says because this is the most important of all sciences. And then he mentioned likewise in the Salaf, they did not used to teach the people al-Hadith and fiqh and the likes like this until they first memorized the Quran. So what he's referring to here, and Allah knows best, is this is the case for the person who began seeking knowledge or memorizing knowledge whenever he's young. The one who is young and he's not of the age of accountability and the likes like this, then no doubt what he will begin with is the memorization of the Quran from the beginning to the end. And he will try to memorize the whole thing whenever he is a child, before even reaching the age of puberty. And he's not necessarily memorizing from the first to the last, but no doubt the first thing they'll memorize is the Fatiha, and then after that the short surah, and then maybe from the back until he becomes accustomed to memorizing. Then he'll try to complete the whole Quran. This is the ideal case for the student who begins learning before he reaches the age of puberty and accountability. As for somebody who did not start learning and seeking knowledge until after reaching the age of puberty and accountability, then he will not necessarily start in this manner. And he's spending all of his time dedicated to memorizing the Quran and the likes like this, because there are other because the people of knowledge, no doubt they have agreed that there's a portion of the Quran that must be memorized in order for the prayer to be considered correct. So this amount of memorization of the Quran will be considered obligatory. Will be considered obligatory. As for after that, then memorizing the Quran is not obligatory. Rather, it's something that's recommended. That is recommended. As for learning the other obligations that one has, for example, the obligation of tahara, and keeping his heart clean and pure from shirk and from hypocrisy and from doubts and whims and from desires and the likes like this, and keeping his body purified and cleaned as well, and learning how to establish the prayer and the other obligations that he may face in one day and one night, then this is no doubt an obligation to learn this knowledge. So he will not busy himself with the Quran and leave learning these affairs. Rather, now he's going to have to gather between the two of them. And go back to the previous principle, and that is showing preference to that which takes priority. And likewise, this has been mentioned by Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak, rahimahullah, who died in 181, and likewise by Imam Ahmed, rahimahullah ta'ala, who died in the year 241. And the likes of these affairs are mentioned in Al-Adab al-Shar'iyya by Ibn Mufrih, rahimahullah ta'ala, that this was narrated from Ahmed, that it was understood from the questions that he was asked that the one who was a child and he's not of the age of accountability, then he will be preoccupied and busy with the Quran and the memorization of the Quran. As for somebody who reached the age of accountability, then now he'll be preoccupied and busy with that which is an obligation for him to learn. So there are rulings and there are rights that he must learn that take precedence over memorizing the Quran. So this is very important to understand the likes of these statements. And sometimes maybe some people who did not have any cultivation or did not learn at the hands of a teacher, for example, when they just read in the books. This is an example of that mistake. They'll read in the books that the scholars, they'll say the first thing that you should learn or memorize is the Quran, and then they'll apply that in an absolute sense, and then maybe they'll be preoccupied with that, and they'll leave off things that take greater importance and are more obligatory, and that would at this time take precedence in the life of a person. So to understand what they intend by these affairs. Another example of that, maybe somebody will hear that the people of knowledge, they say the first book in the Arabic language a student he will study is Al-Ajurrumiyyah. Maybe they'll hear the likes of the scholars saying that, but they don't understand what is intended. What is intended, the first book that a student will study, a student who understands the Arabic language. Not every student. Not a student who doesn't speak Arabic. Not a student that doesn't speak Arabic. A student that doesn't speak Arabic, he will not begin with that Al-Ajurrumiyyah. That's not what they intend. Whenever you ask the Shaykh and he says, what is your advice for the first book that we should start with regards to studying the Arabic language? And he's going to tell him in the Arabic language, to a student who understands the Arabic language, Al-Ajurrumiyyah. And because the goal behind learning that book is in order to rectify the tongue, and likewise the reading, so a person, he will be able to pronounce and read and speak clearly without making mistakes. And the one who does not even know the Arabic language, he will not even reach that goal in the first place. So the one who doesn't know the Arabic language, he will begin with those books that are authored with the aim and the intent of teaching the non-native speaker how to speak the Arabic language. And after he takes off on that path, now later on he'll be qualified to study the first book that a student of knowledge will study in the Arabic language. So to understand what they mean by these awwaliyah, or what is studied first and the likes like this is very important, because if not, a person, he can waste a lot of time. If not, a person, he can waste a lot of time and a lot of effort, and then in the end he may not get very far. So this is something that's very important. So what one would do, no doubt, the children who are under the age of puberty, then they will be directed to memorize the Quran, and they should show great concern to that and preference to that, and strive the best that they can to memorize that before they even reach the age of puberty. But somebody after the age of puberty, or somebody who accepted Islam later in life, for example, or somebody who was guided to the straight path after he was an adult, or the likes like this, a teenager or adult, for example, then at this time he's going to still have concern with memorizing the Quran, but likewise he will memorize other sciences as well. That will be a means to be a foundation and fundamentals for him in his creed, first and foremost, and likewise the obligations that he must be upon and perform with regards to the sacred rites of Islam. So with regards to the Quran, now he will look to those verses or those portions of the Quran that take precedence and that are more virtuous. For example, somebody who accepted Islam and in older age, for example, or he wants to start memorizing the Quran and the likes like this, now he will memorize first the verses and the chapters that take precedence and that have virtue. And after memorizing the Fatiha, and then likewise some short surahs that he will recite in his prayers, he will memorize, for example, Ayatul Kursi. He will begin here like this: Ayatul Kursi, the best and the most virtuous verse in the Quran. So he'll show preference to that. And then likewise the last two verses from Surah Al-Baqarah, for example, he'll show preference to that. And he'll begin here memorizing that which is most important from these verses and from the chapters of the Quran, and then moving in this manner. And likewise it would be advised for him as well to memorize some important verses with regards to understanding the proper creed and the proper belief. So that way he will couple his creed and his belief with verses from the book of Allah Azza wa Jal. So, and then he will move in this manner. So to begin with the Quran, and no doubt this is very important. But as for somebody who was an adult and he was going to begin memorizing, then he's going to look in this affair and he's going to have to gather between the Quran and other sciences and learning other affairs that will take precedence and be considered more important, because it would be an obligation before memorizing the Quran. So he will not neglect memorizing the Quran, but neither will he show preference to that which is not obligatory over something that is obligatory. And this goes back to having understanding in the religion. And many times the student, he will not have that. So again, this is an indication of the great importance to have a good teacher that will direct the person and show him the right path and guide him to the right way, that which he needs to know over that which he wants to know. And there is knowledge that one he must know, and then there's knowledge that person he has a desire to learn. So the one who is truthful, he will learn that which he must know first and foremost, along with that which he has a desire to. And sometimes the soul, it would lean to a particular science, the science of hadith or the science of usul al-fiqh or the likes like this. And all of these sciences of Islam are very beneficial and very important. But from them, there are those that take precedence. And that's the point now. So whenever he's learning, he will not show entire preference to the Quran and not learn the knowledge that is incumbent upon him. Rather, he'll gather between the two. And if he cannot do both of them, then he will learn the knowledge that's incumbent upon him first and foremost, even before memorizing the Quran. And for the one who is an adult. And like this is the advice of the people of knowledge. So he is mentioning here that he will also be cautious from being busy or becoming preoccupied, meaning after he memorized the Quran. If he memorized the Quran, or if he memorized something from the Quran, he'll be cautious likewise not to be preoccupied with the other sciences until he forgets, or he's negligent with something from the Quran, something that he already memorized, or he would not put what he memorized from the Quran in jeopardy to be forgotten, meaning that he will be from those who review the Quran often. And from the best times to review the Quran is in the night prayer, the non-obligatory prayer, and the non-obligatory night prayer, and likewise in the duha prayer, or even as well in as-sunan ar-rawatib. A person, he can make his review and the likes of these non-obligatory prayers, and whenever there's no particular type of sunnah with regards to the recitation and the non-obligatory prayers, and he can make his review in these times, and as well as review in the morning and in the evening, as we have seen the best times for memorizing and reviewing. So the point is, now he is advising that although he will be busy with learning hadith and learning fiqh and the likes like this, but he will not be so preoccupied with that he will forget that which he memorized or neglect his memorization without any review. So a person of hadith and fiqh, in reality, he's a person of the Quran. So these sciences, they go together. They're all connected together. And hadith is the clarification of the Quran, is the detailed clarification of the Quran. And the fiqh and the understanding is the fruit of that which is derived from the sciences of the Quran and the Sunnah together. So a person, he will gather between these affairs, and he will not neglect one over the other. Rather, they will all support each other. So he says, وَبَعْدَ حِفْظِ الْقُرْآنِ يَحْفَظُ مِنْ كُلِّ فَنٍّ مُخْتَصَرًا وَيَبْدَأُ بِالْأَهَمِ. So he says, وَبَعْدَ حِفْظِ الْقُرْآنِ, after memorizing the Quran, يَحْفَظُ مِنْ كُلِّ فَنٍّ مُخْتَصَرًا, he'll memorize from every science a summarized text. And this is also very important. He'll memorize a summarized text, and he will begin with that which is most important. He says, وَمِنْ أَهَمِّهَا, and from the most important summarized text is al-hadith wal-usul wal-nahu thumma al-baqi. Al-hadith wal-usul wal-nahu. Al-hadith is the hadith. Wal-usul, wallahu alam, he's referring to usul al-fiqh or usul al-din. Wal-nahu, in the Arabic grammar, thumma al-baqi, and then the rest of them. Wallahu alam about the example of his arrangement, but no doubt we know that the most important of the sciences is the science of al-aqidah and creed, and this is where he will begin first and foremost. And if a person, he had the wrong creed and the wrong belief, then that which he memorized from the Quran will not benefit him, and likewise that which he memorized from the hadith will not benefit him. And how could he ever truly have fiqh whenever he did not understand the foundation of the religion properly in the first place? So the greatest fiqh is al-fiqh al-akbar, as the people of knowledge have mentioned, the understanding of at-tawheed, and the understanding of the proper creed and the proper belief. And if this is rectified, then the rest of the sciences will be beneficial. And likewise the deeds, they'll be proper. But if there's a deficiency in the creed, this leads to a deficiency in action and deed. And this is something that there's no doubt about. But the point that he's making here that's very important is that after memorizing the Quran, he will begin with the mukhtasarat. And the people of knowledge, they have authored works in many different manners. From them, there are works that are considered mukhtasara. They're summarized, and they're short and brief. And there are other types of work that are considered mutawwala. They're long, and they're very large works, and the likes like this. So before delving into the long and the detailed and the deep works of the people of knowledge, a person, he will learn and memorize a specific text that is summarized and brief in each science, in these sciences. And for example, in creed, he'll memorize, for example, the al-qawaid al-arba, and likewise he will memorize usul al-thalatha, like this. He'll begin in this manner like this, memorizing these brief texts, clarifying the reality of at-tawheed and the dangers of shirk, and clarifying the detailed reality of al-Islam in a brief and summarized manner. And then these texts here, they're going to be foundations and fundamentals with him for the rest of his journey in seeking knowledge. And everything that's mentioned in these particular small and brief texts is the detailed explanation of all of this affairs found in those major and large books. But the point is now that he will memorize this summarized knowledge, and it will be in his heart with him. As for that which is in the long and detailed explanations or the longer works, then this is something, no doubt, that a student will eventually benefit from, and he will go there, but this will be for receiving more detailed information or clarified explanation and the likes like that. And it's not something that he's going to carry with him. So he will not busy himself over there with that. Rather, he will busy himself first and foremost with memorizing these small, summarized texts in each science, like this. So he will first with regards to creed. If he got a little bit longer, then after usul al-thalatha, he will do kitab al-tawheed. for example. And if he wanted to continue, he would do Al-Aqidah Al-Wasitiyya. If he memorized these texts right here, and they are memorized in his heart and creed, he's good. After that, and he learned them from a teacher, and he understood them, then after that, reading in the different books of creed, it will not harm him, inshallah, and he will be able to benefit from that. And his knowledge will grow from there. These usul will be foundations for him, and that his knowledge will grow from and flourish from, and his understanding returns back to them. And he'll be standing on something very firm by the permission of Allah. By the permission of Allah. So this is how he will begin. He will not jump stages. He will not think he's somebody he's not. Rather, he'll realize who he is. He's a beginner. He's a beginner in seeking knowledge. The people of knowledge, they refer many times to some of the works that are for beginners. They call them, for example, like in Tajweed, Tuhfatu al-Atfal. Tuhfatu is a beautiful gift, a nice present and gift that somebody will give somebody. Al-Atfal. Al-Atfal means children. And the gift for the children. But this is not, it's not intended the children like the little kids. And although they could definitely benefit from that, what is intended are the children, meaning in learning. In learning. So those who are beginners in knowledge, they're considered children in knowledge. So if a person is in the beginning stages, he's considered a child. So the same way a child, he's not fed the same food that an adult is fed, and he's not eating the same amount or in the same manner as well. And if he were to do that, it will harm him. So likewise the child, he learns in the same manner, and he's nourished and cultivated in knowledge in the same way. Likewise the student. He's cultivated the same way in knowledge, little by little. And if he does like this, you will find that he will grow in a good way, in a beneficial way, and his knowledge will grow likewise, and he will become strong. So to realize that in the beginning that I'm a beginner student of knowledge, like this, and then to begin with these foundations, memorizing these summarized texts. And then likewise in hadith, if he moves after the creed, he'll memorize a small text in hadith, like Nukhbat al-Fikr, or like Al-Bayquniyya, for example. And he will memorize after that like Al-Ajurumiyya and Nahu, for example. And the likes like this small text. And these will be the foundations and fundamentals for him in that particular science. Al-Waraqat, in Usul al-Fiqh. And you will find that many of these texts, they'll either be written in a regular form like a Nathar, or you can find them also in a Nazm, which is in poetry form. So the point is now he's encouraging the student of knowledge to memorize. What would he memorize? He will memorize the summarized text. This is the knowledge that he'll memorize it the way he memorized the Fatiha. He'll memorize it the way he memorized the Fatiha. Like this. And this knowledge will be with him. And then from this knowledge here, the rest of the knowledge it will grow from. This will be the foundation and the base for his learning and his education. This is very important if he does this like this. If he does this like this, he will benefit in a great manner. Likewise in hadith, what I mentioned, that was in Musalah hadith, Nukhbat al-Fikr, and Al-Bayquniyya, and the likes like that. These are very small texts. But if a person memorized them, and then later on he's given success to learn them from somebody who's qualified and a sincere advisor, he will benefit in that manner. The first hadith that he'll memorize, the 40 hadith of An-Nawawi, and he'll show great concern to that. And these hadith here, they're great and amazing, major narrations. The author himself, rahimahullah, he selected them and chose them because they are all narrations that someone from the people of knowledge, if not many, at least one person has mentioned that these narrations are narrations that Islam revolves around. Meaning that no matter how far a person he digs and he studies, all of these issues here, they return back to these narrations. So these narrations are very, very important in Islam and very, very beneficial for building a foundation in knowledge. Sheikh Abdul Razak al-Badr, hafidhahullah, he mentioned one time he went to a country in Africa, and he was teaching these 40 hadith, just to show how important they are. He's teaching these 40 hadith, and he noticed that in the society there are problems, and there are mukhalafat, and where this particular society are doing things that's contrary to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So he's noticing this by himself. And he said, so I started treating these problems and these ills that I'm seeing in the society with the narrations in the 40 hadith. until some of the students, they started to realize what I'm doing. So they started telling me, oh, in this tribe they have this problem, and over here they do this and do that, and started telling him more of the ills and the misunderstandings that they have in their community and their society. And the Shaykh, he's addressing them and curing them and refuting those doubts and removing that falsehood just with these 40 hadith. Just with these 40 hadith. So this goes from having that foundation, and then likewise, of course, he has knowledge of the meanings of those affairs and the benefits and the fundamentals and the rulings that are derived from there. But the point is to realize how beneficial it is to memorize the foundations of Al-Islam and to memorize these small texts that will be with you wherever you go. That will be with you wherever you go. And he mentioned before, likewise, that memorization, that also you always think about it. And yudim al-fikra fiha. He mentioned that in the previous class we were reading. Always thinking about them. So he's always contemplating and reflecting over those particular texts. And whenever a person first learns, he has an understanding. And maybe he'll memorize, and then maybe he'll study that particular text, and he will have great benefit. And then he will continue studying other texts. And he will grow in his knowledge, and then if he returns back to that text previously and he reflects upon it, now he will see more than he's seen before. He will see more than he's seen before. For example, the Usul al-Thalatha. Usul al-Thalatha we're all aware of. Many of us have memorized that. We have studied it, alhamdulillah, in this masjid. More than one time, I'm sure. Alhamdulillah. But I've pondered over it recently and just realized how amazing it is how the author arranged that whole affair about those questions in the grave. And that's what the Usul al-Thalatha is about. But whenever he closed with the narration of the Prophet, wa Ra's al-Amri al-Islam. Wa Ra's al-Amri al-Islam, and the head of the affair is al-Islam. And if you realize the greatness of these Usul al-Thalatha and the status of them and the danger that is with regards to them, that we're going to be held accountable in our grave to these affairs, and then and the last thing he says to you, the head of the affair is al-Islam. This is sincere advice. This is a beautiful matter and a beautiful way, subhanallah. So the point is now that this knowledge here, that it's memorized, these brief and summarized texts, they're like the fruit of many years of studying. The scholars, they will have many years of detailed studying and going through hardship and difficulty, and they will obtain a great amount of knowledge and light and understanding in the religion, to where they can look into all of these different evidences and all of these different issues and topics, and then summarize the best of that in a small text. And then the fact that some of these small texts like this, they have been well known and widespread ever since they're authored until today, that it's a clear sign that Allah has written acceptance for these particular texts, meaning that Allah was pleased with the author, that the fact that they're widespread and accepted amongst the Muslims, that these are very beneficial texts. So to memorize them and to comprehend them, understand them is very, very, very beneficial, and this is the way to learn. So this knowledge will be with a person. Like Imam al-Shafi, he said, "Ilmi ma'i haythu ma yamamtu ينفعني قلبي وعاء له لا بطن صندوقي إن كنت في البيت كان العلم فيه معي أو كنت في السوق كان العلم في السوق." He said, my knowledge is with me wherever I go. It benefits me. My heart is carrying it. It's not in the belly of a box. It's not in a box or left on the side somewhere. He says, if I'm in my house, then my knowledge is in my house, and if I'm in the market, then my knowledge is in the market. So this happens like this. How can a person be like that? By memorizing these small texts. Like this. And then after that, studying them and learning them, and then continuing upon that way. Somebody who, maybe he's a great scholar, but if you ask him, if you listen to him, or if you study with him, you will find he memorized Usul al-Thalath. It's still in his heart. He will even mention it sometimes. Portions from that in the class. And the likes like this. And you will hear that. Or Qawaid Arba. Or other than that, Kitab al-Tawheed. Or you will hear somebody, for example, sometimes from the people of knowledge, you will hear him ask a question. and you listen to him give the fatwa, and the fatwa is coming from a chapter that you memorized from the book of At-Tawheed. He's asking about the Tamima, for example. If you memorize Kitab At-Tawheed, your mind is going to go straight to that chapter and remember those evidences, and then if you understood them, you're going to mention the ruling from that this is haram and not allowed. وَمَنْ تَعَلَّقَ بِشَيْءٍ وُكِّلَ إِلَيْهِ, and the likes like this. So it's going to be beneficial for the person in that manner. So the one who's small and the one who's major, the one who's a beginner student and the one who has reached a high level of knowledge, they're all relying with regards to their knowledge upon these principles, upon these texts and these fundamentals. So this here is golden advice likewise. If a person here were to neglect this, and to not be concerned with memorizing these brief and small texts, and then he went to the long text instead. The long text instead, he said, man, I can memorize more. My memorization is stronger. So then he'll go to something which is much longer before these small texts. For example, even if he's mentioning just the text that we mentioned, instead of doing Qawaid Arba or Surah Thalath, he's going to go straight to Kitab al-Tawheed or straight to Al-Wasitiyya and the likes like this. And he's going to skip these affairs. The time that he takes memorizing these affairs, he could have memorized these other small texts along with other small texts. He could have memorized these other small texts along with other small texts and the likes like this. So the time that he takes in spending memorizing a long text, maybe he will do that and then he will wear himself out and be tired, and maybe he will lose desire after that and not memorize anything else. He spent so much time memorizing that. Or maybe he'll become preoccupied, maybe he'll become busy, maybe he'll get a job now. Or maybe he'll get married now. Now he will not have time to memorize like he did. So now he has this one long text that maybe he does not even know what it means or has very little understanding of that. And if he had paid attention and followed the advice of the scholars, instead of that long text, he could have memorized 5, 6, 7 small texts that will be foundations and fundamentals with him wherever he goes. Wherever he goes. We understand this. This is very, very important. The scholars, they suggest this, the likes of this advice based upon experience with knowledge themselves, and also experience with students and seeing people who are successful and seeing people who are not successful on the path of seeking knowledge, on the path of seeking knowledge. So the one who learns these steps from the people of knowledge and follows that sincerely, the best that he can, you'll find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will aid him and help him, and he'll have much good after some time. And knowledge is like drops of water, and they accumulate. The water accumulates eventually until it's rushing down the road or down the valley, and the likes like this. So before there's no water there, and then the water starts accumulating drop after drop, and now until it's rushing down the valley. Until it's rushing down the valley. Like that, knowledge likewise. It starts small and it accumulates little by little. And likewise a person's memorization as well. Somebody may say, if you tell them memorize, for example, Juz Amma, he'll look at it, these pages here, and he'll be like, whoa, that's so much. Or you tell him Baqarah, what? He would think, no, that's so much. Or you tell him Surah Thalatha, or 40 hadith, I can't even memorize one. And like this, maybe he'll be afraid, he'll be scared. Maybe his memorization is really not strong. But if he's sincere and he's truthful and he tries, it will get strong. And if he seeks the help of Allah Azza wa Jal, it will get strong. It will become stronger, just like the body. We talked about that before. It's been narrated from Muhammad ibn Muslim ibn Shihab az-Zuhri, rahimahullah. He died in the year 124, from the greatest of the scholars of hadith and from the best of the memorizers and from the best of the hufaz. Yani literally. He said, بدأنا الحفظ وقلوبنا كالشعاب فأصبحت كالأودية تلتهم كل شيء. He said that we began memorizing and our hearts are like narrow mountain passes, like narrow mountain trails, and then they became to be like valleys devouring everything, swallowing up everything. And in the beginning their hearts are tight. And even the Arab, and it was known that they could memorize in the first place. But he's mentioning this, and they began, and it was difficult for them, but they continued until they memorized everything that they came across, and they became Hufaz al-Islam. And those who memorized and preserved and maintained the narrations of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and carried them to those after them, and transmitted that to those after them, radiyallahu anhum. So this is the case. Maybe he's not able to, but if he tries, he will be able to. If he tries, he'll be able to. Somebody say, well, maybe I'm too old. But that's not the case. We've seen likewise, even if somebody's old, he can still memorize. Shaykhuna Shaykh Abdul Muhsin, he was asked about that. Hafidhullah, can somebody who reached the age of 50 memorize? Would he still be able to memorize the Quran? He said, yes, and I'm from those who did it. Yes, and I'm from those who did it. And he mentioned before, the companions, they all learned after they had been elders, and the likes like this. So, maybe it will be more difficult, but the one who's truthful with Allah Azza wa Jalla and he tries, he can still benefit a lot, even if he's an elder. Even if he's an elder. The point is to benefit from knowledge so long as one is alive. So long as one is alive. To benefit from that in learning and in application and in spreading the knowledge and benefiting the people, because it's light and Islam is established in this manner and the Sunnah is spread in this manner and it's conveyed in this manner and it's preserved and maintained in this manner. By learning and by teaching and carrying the knowledge in the heart, and likewise in the conduct and manners and application. And the conduct and manners and application. So he says to memorize these small texts. Also it's advised as well to not delve into the large text until one first memorizes the small text. And likewise to not delve into the differences of opinion until first a person is able to see and clearly understand and visualize the issues. And he'll learn that which is right first, and he'll follow that. And then once he begins, he obtains a foundation and knowledge, now he will start to understand the differences of opinions and the likes like that in fiqh, so on and so forth. So he says, ثُمَّ يَشْتَغِلُ بِاسْتِشْرَاحِ مَحْفُوظَاتِهِ ويعتمد من الشيوخ في كل فن أكملهم في الصفات السابقة. Then after he memorized these different small texts, now he will be busy learning and seeking the explanation of that which he memorized. Seeking the explanation of that which he memorized. And with regards to that, he will rely upon those teachers that are most complete with regards to the previous descriptions and attributes that have preceded. And he will memorize these particular texts that are considered summarized foundations, and then likewise he will look for those teachers who have those traits that have preceded to teach him and to explain for him those particular texts. This is something that he will be busy with. You need to memorize those small texts and then to get the understanding and the detailed explanation of them. And this is likewise very proper and very beneficial. A person, if he has the small text as an outline in his heart and in his mind, the detailed explanation that comes from his teacher or that he reads and the likes like this from the other sources, this will go into his mind as an understanding. So he will have the original text as a memorized foundation, and the understanding he will be able to express it in his own words. The understanding, this detailed explanation, all this will come by comprehending that. He'll comprehend that, and then now he will be able to explain that text in his own words, if he comprehended it properly. So then by memorizing this text properly first, understanding the general meaning and the intent from that, and then having a detailed explanation from somebody who's qualified, now after that a person, he himself will be qualified if he understood it properly. So he will be able to now explain the issues in his own words. The one who learned the proper creed and proper belief and the details of that, and he studied the science of Aqidah until he's grounded in that and he understands these issues in detail, he will be able to read the text of Surah Thalatha and explain that to people in the language that they speak. In the language that they speak. He'll be able to read the Qawaid al-Arba and explain that to the people in the language that they speak. This is if he learns properly like this, and this is what is required, and this is what the Ummah needs. People who they themselves, they learn their religion till they can read these small texts and they can talk about them and discuss them and clarify what is intended from them to the Ummah in this manner like this. These are the ones they are beneficial. So this is likewise what has preceded in those lines of poetry. فَمَا حَوَى الْغَايَةَ فِي أَلْفِ سَنَةٍ شَخْصٌ فَخُذْ مِنْ كُلِّ فَنٍ أَحْسَنًا. How was that? بِحِفْظِ مَتْنٍ جَامِعٍ لِلرَّاجِحِ تَأْخُذُوهُ عَلَى مُفِيدٍ نَاسِحِ. فَمَا حَوَى الْغَايَةَ فِي أَلْفِ سَنَةٍ شَخْصٌ. Nobody who is able to memorize all of the knowledge, not in 1,000 years. Nobody's able to memorize all the knowledge, and not even 1,000 years. فَمَا حَوَى الْغَايَةَ فِي أَلْفِ سَنَةٍ شَخْصٌ فَخُذْ مِنْ كُلِّ فَنٍ أَحْسَنًا. So you take from every science the best of that, meaning that summarized text. The best of that will be the summarized text, like that. The summarized text. بِحِفْظِ متن جامع للراجح, by memorizing a small text that is concise and consists of the best understanding of that science and the proper understanding of that science. نعم تأخذه على مفيد ناصح. Like this, you learn that from somebody who's beneficial and a sincere advisor. You learn that from somebody who's beneficial, meaning he's founded in that science and he knows that text that he's teaching you, and what is apparent from him is that he's a sincere advisor, meaning he doesn't want anything from you except for you to learn that knowledge and apply it and spread it. Except for you to learn that knowledge. He's teaching you not because he wants anything from you whatsoever, except for you to benefit from the knowledge that he has, and to learn that and to spread that. And this is the way of the prophets and messengers, to call the people in order to benefit. All they want from the people is not their money and not their wealth and not their daughters, but rather for them to believe in Allah and to believe in the Prophet ﷺ and follow the proper way. So that's what a teacher, he wants from the people likewise. He doesn't want anything from them except for them to believe in Allah and to follow the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. If they do that, he won. If they do that, he's a winner. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Now, this is the case. And even if they didn't do that and he was sincere, he's still a winner. Alhamdulillah. But this is his aim and goal. This is his aim and goal, for the people to benefit and for the religion to be established and for the sunnah to be applied and for the statement of Allah Azza wa Jalla, La ilaha illallah, to be high and lofty in the hearts of the people and in the land. In the hearts of the people and in the land. So this is by this manner. By this manner, learning the summarized knowledge, and then after that, learning it from somebody who was beneficial in that and a sincere advisor. And a sincere advisor. And sincere advisor. So this small knowledge that's considered mukhtasar or summarized, that's the foundation. And that is going to stay with you, because you're able to memorize that. As for that which is in the long books, you're not able to memorize that. But if you comprehend that, then that understanding will be with you. Maybe you will not be able to memorize the whole explanation, but the general understanding of that will be with you. So now you can express that in your own words. There will be certain benefits or certain statements that you do memorize from that large text and from those large works, but the whole thing itself is not for memorizing, rather it's for understanding. So there's a difference between the mahfuz and the maqru'. There's a difference between that which is considered mahfuz and that which is considered maqru'. So the mukhtasarat تكون محفوظة والمطولات تكون مقروءة. Therefore for qira'ah. So these small summarized texts, they're for memorizing. The long books, they're for research and delving in to find the details of that which is memorized. You understand that? So therefore these small texts, they're for memorizing, and those long works, they're for reading and research. The people of knowledge, they say, إذا حفظت قليلا انتفعت كثيرا وإذا قرأت كثيرا انتفعت قليلا. This is the way. لأن الحفظ يقر والمقروء يفر. So if you memorize a little bit, you'll benefit a lot. And if you read a lot, you'll benefit a little bit. And this is because the memorization, it stays with you and it's firm. And that what you read, it goes away and it doesn't stay with you. You read it and you benefit from it, but the precise thing that you read doesn't stay with you. It goes away. As for what you memorize, then it's with you. Like Imam Shafi said, in my house, in the market, wherever I go, that one's with me. So therefore, no matter where you're at, you'll benefit from that. As for what you didn't memorize, that's in the book or in the notebook, then maybe you'll be in need of that and the book is not around you. Or maybe your phone died, for example. You lost your battery. You don't have your phone no more. So now you don't know what to say. You don't know what to do. You're looking around like, well, I don't know, I have to wait till I get back home, or I got to find a charger. Do you have a charger for your phone? I can look up the fatwa from Shaykh Ibn Baz, rahimahullah, for example. But if you memorize that knowledge, then alhamdulillah, wherever you go, it's beneficial for you and for those who are with you. So, to show the importance of memorizing, it's been narrated from Khalil ibn Ahmed, rahimahullah. He said, "ما سمعت شيئا إلا كتبته, وما كتبته إلا حفظته, وما حفظته إلا نفعني." إلا نفعني. He says, Khalil ibn Ahmed, rahimahullah. He said, "I never heard anything except I wrote it down, and anything that is beneficial, that I need, that I felt I need. I never heard anything except I wrote it down. And I never wrote anything down except I memorized it. And I never memorized anything except it benefited me. Again, to emphasize the importance of memorizing for the ummah in general and for the students of knowledge specifically. And I remind Again, what was mentioned previously, that from the plots of the enemies of Islam is to turn the Muslims away from memorizing. To turn the Muslims away from memorizing. Oh, you don't have to memorize. هذا تعليم تقليدي. That's what they say. Ta'lim, this is the old way of learning. You don't have to memorize. Why are you memorizing? Why do you have this old text, Usul al-Thalatha? We're sitting there memorizing that, reciting it over and over, Kitabatu, all that, like this, and they'll belittle these affairs and make it seem like it's not important, but in reality it's very important, and they have plots to turn the Muslims away from their religion. They have plots to turn the Muslims away from their religion, because if that knowledge is memorized in the hearts, then that religion will remain, and it will be firm, and it will be spread. Likewise, so memorizing is a part of the deen. The Muslims, they memorize the Islam. Islam is memorized. This is very important. Islam is memorized. And the rulings of Islam, the books of Islam, the Quran, the Sunnah is memorized. It's memorized. It's written down. It's written down likewise, but it's memorized. It's memorized. So if we have children that are strong in memorization, especially if they're young, busy them with that. Let them memorize the Quran. Let them memorize Usul al-Thalatha, Quad Arba. Memorize Kitab. If they're going to go after to memorize this poetry that's beneficial about manners and conduct, and being a man and being upright upon the Sunnah and the likes like this. This is very important. This will benefit them. This will benefit them, even if they don't understand it at that time. And because the children, before the age of puberty especially, they can't understand a lot, but they can memorize a lot. So if you talk to them a lot, they're not going to understand everything, but they can carry a lot. You can give them something and memorize it very fast. So they have the ability to memorize, but they don't have the ability to understand. So you don't neglect the understanding. No, you teach them Tawheed according to their level, but maybe they'll memorize some text that they don't have, that's very heavy, like the Quran, for example. They can memorize Baqarah, for example, and it's heavy. It's heavy and it's great, but for them to memorize it, it's easy for him. It's easy for him. So you're not going to explain the whole Baqarah for him. You're going to just explain to him that Allah, He's the only one worthy of worship, and you can show him why in the creation. And the likes like this. But whenever he gets older, that memorization that's with him, it will benefit him. It will benefit him. Or even Usul al-Thalatha. Maybe he memorized that whenever he's 9 years old, 10 years old, like that. Maybe he doesn't really figure it out. But whenever he becomes 16, 17, 18, that will be with him, and now he will understand by the permission of Allah. And it will benefit him. So to memorize is very important. With regards to the memorization, in reality, a person, he did not truly learn. He did not truly learn until he memorized. Memorizing is the reality of learning. So when we're talking about memorizing, we're talking about memorizing, for example, of the Noble Quran, or the text of Bulugh al-Maram, for example, or the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, 40 hadith. That's memorizing a text. But also the understanding and the rulings and the different details that come along as well. This is memorized. And the likes, the definition linguistically of different affairs, the definition legislatively of different affairs, whatever science we're studying, the definition of the Sunnah linguistically, for example, the definition of the Sunnah with the Muhaddithin, with the Usuliyin, with the Fuqaha, like this. There's different definitions. So likewise, these things are memorized as well. Somebody might say, what is the definition if you're studying Nahu, for example, ma ta'rif al-fa'il, for example. What's the definition of the fa'il? Right? So if you didn't memorize, that means you don't know. So if you don't know, that means you didn't learn. So then if you're sitting in class for days and days and months, and you still didn't memorize and you still didn't know, then you still didn't benefit the benefit that's required. So it has to be memorized. So how do you know that you memorized? When somebody asks you a question and then you know the answer. Somebody asks you the question and you know the answer. Now you learned. You learned that topic, you learned that one. Somebody might say, for example, what is the greatest chapter in the Quran? Al-Fatiha. We learned from the hadith Abi Sa'id ibn Mu'alla. So we learned that because the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned that. So, but this is something you know the answer to. So now you learned that. This is something you know. So that's the knowledge that's with you wherever you go. That's the knowledge that with you wherever you go. So this is what you know. As for the one that you didn't memorize, then you didn't really learn that one. And maybe sometimes it'll be close to you, but you comprehend it a little bit, but it's not all the way there, and you can't talk about it. So this one he didn't learn likewise. So it's very important to learn about Tawheed until you can talk about it. And you learn about Allah and the greatness of Allah and the names and attributes of Allah until you can talk about it. To learn about Prophet Muhammad ﷺ until you can talk about him. And when you talk about Allah and His Messenger, you don't say anything wrong. You don't have the wrong understanding. You don't freestyle or make anything up. You say the facts that you know. You say the facts that you know, that you learned from the proper source, and the likes like this, and you can talk about Allah and His Messenger, and you can clarify the meaning of the Shahada, the Shahadatain, or you can talk about Islam, or you can talk about Salah, and the likes like this. Like, for example, some non-Muslim says, what is Salah? What are you going to say to him? What are you going to say to him? If you don't know, now you're going to see what you know. He's going to tell, what do you believe in? Some Christian come up, you're a Muslim? Oh yeah, what do you believe in? And then what do you just say? We believe in Allah, we believe in the angels, and like this, and then let him go. And maybe he's going to benefit. No, you have to clarify for him what you believe in. We believe there's nothing worthy of worship except for Allah, and you show him why, and you tell him why, like this. So the knowledge, it has to be memorized. That's the point. The knowledge, it has to be memorized. In this manner, a person, he has learned, and he hasn't learned truly until he memorized. So I remember one time in the university, it was in the first year in Kulliyat al-Hadith, and our teacher was teaching us Mustalah Hadith. It's the first semester. It's the second semester, but it's the first time we're studying Mustalah Hadith. And the teacher's name is Abdurrahman Rashaidan. He's the one who's reading always on Sheikh Abdul Muhsin. Also, he read on Sheikh Abdul Razak, Hafidhahumullah. But first week he came and he taught us the books of Mustalah Hadith and how it started and how the books came. The first one to write about Mustalah Hadith, Al-Imam al-Shafi. He died in 204. And then he mentioned after that the first one to write a whole book about Mustalah Hadith, Al-Rahma Ramuzi. And he died in the year 360. And then he mentioned all the way up to Qasimi, the last one. He died in the year 1332. So all through there he mentioned an author, a book and its author, and when he died. And alhamdulillah, we write it all down. But the next week whenever he came, he just popped on us. He said, what book did so-and-so write? And he was like, I don't know. He said, when did so-and-so die? And he said, what is the book of so-and-so, like this? And we were all completely new students, fresh. So we were like, and plus we were scared because he's very strong and he's very serious. And he became so mad at us, and he slammed his hand on the table and he said, لا تحفظون لا تستطيعون أن تحفظوا. He said, you people cannot memorize. He said, لعلكم تذهبون إلى الشريعة أو إلى الدعوة. Maybe you should go to. He said, غيروا الكلية. Go change your كلية. He's banging on the table. He's very serious. You guys come. 1 whole week you can't memorize. Like this. He's screaming. 1 whole week you can't memorize. Go to another kuliya. Go to another. You're not supposed to be here. Go sit in the back like this. And then after that we realized, the seriousness of this affair. That he came and he taught us last week. We're supposed to be able to know what he taught us. So after that we became shy. That we'll be asked something that the teacher had taught us before, and we say, I don't know. You understand? That's how we should be. If we learn some knowledge and somebody sit down and teach us something, after that we should learn it and be shy to say later on, I don't know. After he had already taught us that, but he taught us a great lesson. After that, everybody knew everything. Whatever he came, not only him, the rest of the teachers likewise. We realize this point now that knowledge is what you memorize. Knowledge is what you memorize. May Allah grant us success. هذا وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.